Rosewood Hollow was a small village far away from the hustle and bustle of cities. It was surrounded by tall trees that seemed to touch the sky and wildflowers that bloomed in every color. A calm stream ran through the village, and its soft, peaceful sound filled the air. The people in the village were simple, kind, and hardworking. They didn't have much, but they had everything they needed to live happily. Milo lived in this quiet village with his family. He was 12 years old, with messy brown hair and bright eyes that were always full of curiosity. His father, Elias, worked hard in the fields, planting and picking crops to sell in the village market. His mother, Clara, worked at home, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of their small but cozy house. They didn't have a lot of money, but their home was always warm, and their love for each other made their lives feel rich. Milo spent most of his days outside. He loved to explore the woods behind his house, where the tall trees created a world of their own. The soft light that filtered through the leaves made the forest feel peaceful and magical. Sometimes he would walk along the stream with his best friend, Hannah, and they would talk about all sorts of things. Hannah was a lively, cheerful girl who was always ready for an adventure. Her long, dark hair matched her bright, shining eyes. She loved nature just as much as Milo did, and they spent many afternoons exploring the woods together. Sometimes they would talk about the strange things they had heard about their village. Milo had often heard whispers from the older villagers about the women in Rosewood Hollow, who seemed to have a strange power over the men. These women were incredibly beautiful, and the men of the village were drawn to them in ways that didn't seem natural. Some of the older women in the village spoke in hushed tones about these women, saying that their beauty had the power to change the way men thought and acted. Milo didn't fully understand it, but he was curious. He had seen these women around the village, and it seemed like the stories might be true. The men would act strangely when they were near, their eyes following the women, their faces filled with admiration or desire. The villagers would talk about how it was, almost as if these women could make the men forget everything else. As much as Milo was curious about the village's secret, he also didn't want to be rude. So he kept his thoughts to himself and spent his days exploring, enjoying his time with Hannah, and listening to the stories told by the older villagers. One day, when the sun was shining brightly and the air was warm, a new woman came to the village. Her name was Anita. She was tall, with long golden hair that shone in the sun. Her eyes were bright green, like the leaves of the trees in spring. She walked through the village with grace and confidence, and it didn't take long for the villagers to notice her. From the moment Anita arrived, people couldn't stop talking about her. The men in the village seemed especially drawn to her. They would stop what they were doing just to look at her, some even following her with their eyes. The women in the village, on the other hand, would stare at her in a mix of admiration and jealousy. Milo was curious, but he tried not to let it show. He had seen beautiful women before, but there was something different about Anita. She didn't smile much, and she always seemed so calm, like she didn't mind the attention. It was almost as if she was used to it, as if she knew the effect she had on people. "I've never seen anyone like her before," Hannah said one afternoon, as they sat by the stream, watching the village. "She's beautiful," Milo agreed, though he didn't quite understand why everyone was so fixated on her. Hannah shrugged. "Maybe she's just really pretty. You know how people can get when they see someone special." But Milo didn't think it was just her looks that made Anita stand out. There was something else about her, something that made everyone around her act strangely. He didn't know what it was, but he felt that there was a secret behind her beauty, something that no one was talking about. As the days passed, Milo began to notice another woman in the village who seemed to have a similar effect on people. Her name was Daphne. She lived in a large old house at the far end of the village, away from the other houses. Daphne was a widow, and she rarely spoke about her past. The villagers didn't know much about her, except that she was known for her beauty, just like Anita. Daphne had long, dark hair that fell around her face in soft waves. Her eyes were a deep, dark brown, and they seemed to see everything. When she walked through the village, it was impossible not to notice her. The men would look at her with the same admiration that they showed Anita. Some of the men even seemed to lose track of what they were doing when she was near. Milo was puzzled. There was something about Daphne that made people act differently. Like Anita, she had this calm, almost quiet power. She never tried to draw attention to herself, but she always seemed to get it. People seemed to be drawn to her in a way they couldn't explain. Milo and Hannah decided to visit Daphne one evening, hoping to learn more about her. They found her sitting in front of a fireplace, her dark hair glowing in the warm light. She smiled at them when they entered, but there was something sad in her eyes. She welcomed them to sit with her, offering them tea. "I don't have many visitors," Daphne said softly. "I'm not much of a talker, but I don't mind the company." As they sat and talked, Milo found himself wondering about Daphne. She spoke little about herself, but asked many questions about the village. She seemed interested in Milo and Hannah's lives, though she always kept a certain distance, as if she was holding something back. After spending time with Daphne, Milo became even more curious about the two women. He wanted to know why they had such power over the people in the village. He started asking around, speaking to the older villagers and listening carefully to their stories. Slowly, he began to put together a picture of what was happening. He learned that both Anita and Daphne had lived in other villages before coming to Rosewood Hollow. In each place, they had caused strange things to happen. Men in those villages would forget their responsibilities, falling under the spell of the women's beauty. It wasn't magic, but it was something strong, something that made the men forget their lives, their families, and even their morals. Milo was troubled. He didn't want to believe that the women were doing anything wrong, but he couldn't ignore what he was hearing. There was something about their beauty, something that made people lose themselves. He didn't know what to do with this knowledge, but he knew that it was important. One evening, Milo decided to talk to Anita. He couldn't keep wondering about her, and he felt he needed to understand more. He found her sitting by the stream, her golden hair shining in the moonlight. "Why do people act like this around you?" Milo asked, his voice quiet. "Why do the men look at you like they can't control themselves?" Anita looked at him, her green eyes soft and knowing. "It's not something I asked for," she said slowly. "It's just who I am. I can't explain it, and I don't want to hurt anyone. But there are things about me that make people act in ways they don't understand. It's not magic, Milo. It's just something that happens when they see me." Milo listened carefully, his mind racing. He realized that Anita wasn't evil. She wasn't trying to control anyone, but her beauty had a power that she couldn't escape. Milo's mind was swirling with thoughts after his conversation with Anita. He had learned more than he expected about the power these women seemed to hold. Neither Anita nor Daphne wanted to hurt anyone, but their beauty seemed to have a strange hold over the men in the village. Milo couldn't stop thinking about it. He wanted to help, but he wasn't sure how. He spent the next few days thinking, asking himself what needed to be done. He couldn't just ignore the way the men were acting. They weren't themselves anymore. They had become obsessed with these women, following them around, and letting their emotions get the best of them. Milo thought about his parents. His mother, Clara, was wise and gentle. She always knew the right thing to say. His father, Elias, was strong and kind, but serious. They both worked hard every day to make their small home a place of warmth and comfort. Milo knew they would understand if he spoke to them about what he had learned. One evening, as the sun began to set and the air cooled, Milo sat with his parents in their small living room. He looked at them both, his heart beating fast as he tried to find the right words. "Mom, Dad, there's something I need to talk to you about," Milo said, his voice shaking slightly. Clara looked at him, her gentle smile turning into a concerned expression. "What is it, Milo?" she asked softly. Milo paused, gathering his thoughts. "It's about the women in the village, Anita and Daphne. I don't think anyone understands what's really going on. The men, they're acting different when they're around them. It's like they can't control themselves. I think something needs to be done." Elias, who had been sitting quietly, nodded slowly. "I see. It's true that the power of beauty can affect people in strange ways. But it's not the fault of the women. They can't control it either. The village needs to learn to see beyond just looks, beyond what people want to see." Milo nodded. "That's what I think too. We need to help the village understand what really matters. It's not about being beautiful or charming. It's about kindness, honesty, and love." Clara smiled at him. "You've always had a wise heart, Milo. I agree with your father. You should talk to the elders and share your thoughts with them. They might listen to you." Milo felt a small weight lift off his shoulders. He had been so worried, but hearing his parents' support made him feel more confident. He knew what he had to do next. He would speak to the elders, and together with his friends, he would make sure the village understood that there was more to people than their beauty. The next day, Milo gathered his friends, Hannah and a few others from the village, and asked them to meet by the old oak tree near the stream. They had all heard about the strange effect that Anita and Daphne had on the villagers. And now Milo had a plan. He was going to talk to the elders to help them see that beauty was not everything. Hannah stood next to him, her eyes bright with excitement. "Are you sure they'll listen to us?" she asked. "I mean, we're just kids." Milo smiled at her. "We may be young, but we're not foolish. The elders listen when people speak with their hearts." The group of children met at the old oak tree, their faces serious but hopeful. They spent hours discussing how they could make the village see beyond beauty. They talked about how people should be judged by their hearts, not by what they looked like. They talked about kindness and how it was more important to love others for who they were than for how they appeared. Finally, after much discussion, Milo stood up. "We'll speak to the elders tomorrow. It's time that Rosewood Hollow changes." The next morning, with the sun rising over the hills, Milo and his friends walked to the village square, where the elders usually met. The village was quiet at this hour, and as they walked, Milo felt a sense of determination fill him. They had to make a difference. When they arrived, the elders were already gathered, sitting on benches near the village well. They looked at the group of children, puzzled. Milo stepped forward, his heart beating fast but steady. "Elders of Rosewood Hollow," he began, his voice firm but respectful. "We've come to speak to you about something important. We need your help. The men in our village are acting strange because of the beauty of two women, Anita and Daphne. But we believe that the village needs to see beyond their looks. Beauty isn't what should matter. What should matter is kindness, love, and honesty." The elders listened, their expressions thoughtful. They exchanged looks, and for a long moment there was silence. Milo stood there, waiting, unsure of what they would say. Finally, Elder Ethel, one of the oldest villagers, spoke. "You speak wisely, Milo. It is true that beauty can be deceiving. And it is true that the hearts of men often follow their desires, even when they know they shouldn't. We've seen it for ourselves." Elder William, who was known for his kindness, nodded. "You're right, Milo. We need to teach the village to look deeper. Beauty may be on the outside, but the heart is what truly matters." Milo's heart swelled with hope. "Thank you. Together, we can make Rosewood Hollow a place where people are valued for who they are inside." The elders agreed to hold a village meeting that evening. Milo and his friends went home, feeling that they had made the first step toward changing things for the better. As the weeks passed, the village slowly began to change. The villagers, encouraged by the words of Milo and the elders, began to see each other in a different light. People no longer placed so much value on beauty, and the men who had once been lost in their admiration of Anita and Daphne began to pay more attention to the inner qualities of others. There was a new sense of community, where kindness and love were what truly mattered. Anita and Daphne, too, found peace. They no longer felt the weight of their beauty controlling the way people treated them. They were free to be themselves, no longer defined by their appearance. Milo, who had started this change, felt proud. He had helped his village see the truth, that true beauty is found in the heart. As he sat by the stream one evening, watching the sun set over Rosewood Hollow, he knew that he had played a part in making the village a better place. He looked around at the smiling faces of his friends and neighbors, and he felt content. The village was reborn, and so was Milo. The end.